Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Lucia and I'm part of the disability provider community. I have quite an urgent but hopefully very quick update for all NDIS providers, participants, their families, and just anyone who is interested in the NDIS reform. And depending when you're going to see this video, you have only 9 days left. Now, what on earth am I talking about? Well, let's quickly dive in. So we all heard about the government wanting to make some changes to the NDIS to make it more efficient, as it has been quite a strain on the federal budget, with the cost blowing out of proportion every following year, right? Because of this, the government have come out with the proposed changes to the NDIS Act 2013, also referred as Getting the NDIS Back on Track, Bill number 1. Everyone should have heard of it by now. If you haven't, I will include a link below for those of you who would like to read. And I will also include a tab here for my video where I briefly explain the proposed changes to the bill. Very simply, the proposed changes to the bill are aimed at making the scheme more efficient, safer for the participant, and easier to navigate and understand. One of the main things that the government is trying to complete right now is creating a draft lists of supports that will be funded under the scheme and those that will not be funded. These lists will presumably provide clearer guidance as to what participants can purchase under the scheme and the type of services the providers are able to provide under the scheme. This is all provided that the bill has passed, of course. Nothing has been set in concrete just yet. Right now, as it stands, NDIS has many grey areas which can be used by participants to really personalize their supports. While this can be viewed as positive for participants and their families, no doubt, just as easily, the grey areas can be exploited by those seeking to take advantage of the scheme. This applies to both the providers and participants, unfortunately. So back to the important bit. The government has come up with 2 lists. Supports that are NDIS supports, and there are 36 categories, and supports that are not NDIS supports, and there are 15 categories so far. These 2 lists are crucial for both participants and providers to understand, as they outline which services and supports will be officially funded by the NDIS and which won't be. Let's dive into some examples. For instance, accommodation and tenancy assistance. It is a support that helps participants with activities to obtain and retain accommodation, like applying for rental or managing tenancy obligations. However, it specifically excludes things like rental costs or mortgage repayments. So if you're a participant or provider, it's important to note that while the assistance to manage the property is covered, the actual rent or mortgage payment is not. So similarly, assistance animals are included as NDIS support. This covers animals specifically trained to help participants with tasks like navigating crowded places. The costs associated with maintaining an assistant animal, such as vet fees and special diets, are also covered. However, if you're thinking of general pet expenses, pets that are not an assistant animal, those won't be funded by the NDIS. Now let's talk about what's not considered as an NDIS support. For example, day-to-day living costs like rent, utility, and groceries are generally not covered by NDIS. However, there are some carve-outs where some additional living costs might be covered if they are directly related to the person's disability. Another example is the modified vehicles. While the NDIS may cover specialized equipment to assist driving, it will not cover the cost of the actual vehicle. Hopefully that's quite understandable. Understanding these distinctions will be crucial for making the most out of the NDIS and ensuring that the supports will be used effectively and appropriately. Providers will need to make sure that the participant are clear on what NDIS will be covering and what the participant will have to cover by themselves. So you may ask, what's the urgency? So you see, the government has opened up an engagement session with the public regarding these 2 lists. But the engagement sessions has a limited window, and it will end on the 18th of August at 5 p.m. Take this opportunity to make yourself be heard. Perhaps you have some great ideas about how these lists can be improved, or you might choose to just speak from experiences and provide some feedback. I will leave a link below where you will be able to access a quick survey on the official government's DSS website, And the survey is comprised of 3 simple questions. Number 1 question is, do you think the draft lists of NDIS supports covers the kinds of disability supports that you think should be included? And if not, what changes would you suggest? Number 2 is, are these goods and services on the draft exclusion lists that you think shouldn't be there? If yes, please list in the order of importance. And the last question is, do you have any further feedback or concerns with the draft NDIS supports lists? So very simple and very quick to access. Link will be down below. So some of the common questions that I see online is, will the list be implemented? The lists are currently in the draft form. That means they are not finalized and have not yet been implemented. Provided the NDIS Act 2013 bill is passed by Parliament, these drafts will be part of a transitional rules that will remain in place until new rule is formally agreed upon by the Commonwealth and the states and the territories. The government right now is actively seeking feedback from participants, providers, and anyone else that is part of the disability sector. The final version of these lists may change based on the feedback received. Again, the implementation of these lists depends on whether they're getting the NDIS back on track. Number 1 bill is passed by Parliament. If the bill is passed, the list will become part of the framework guiding what is and isn't covered by the NDIS. So the next questions that I also see online is, when will they take effect, these lists? If the bill is successfully passed, the list could be implemented shortly after. However, there isn't a specific date yet, as it depends on the legislative process as the finalization of the public consultation. The lists, once implemented, will act as transitional rule. What that means is that they will provide guidance on NDIS supports until more permanent rule is established and agreed upon by all relevant parties, which may also include gathering more feedback from the community. Okay, so what's the next steps for providers and participants? If you haven't already, consider providing feedback on the draft lists before the consultation period ends. This is your chance to influence what gets included in the final version. While the exact timeline isn't certain, it's important to start preparing for the possibility that these lists will come into the effect. This might involve adjusting your services or budgets based on the supports that will and won't be covered. In summary, the draft lists are not yet implemented and are contingent on the passage of the bill by the Parliament. If the bill passes, the lists could take effect relatively soon, but they will initially serve as a transitional measure while long-term rules are developed. If you are part of the disability sector, a provider, a participant, or anyone else who is affected by disability but not in the scheme, or someone who is just interested in the reform, make your voices heard. We all have the power to make our voices heard, so use it. We have now a limited time to contribute to the improvement of the scheme, to make it more fair, more safe, and easier to navigate, so let's do it together. Again, the consultations with the public is closing on the 18th of August 2024 at 5 p.m. That's all for now. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate your support by clicking the like button, subscribing to my channel, and also sharing this video.